So as I say, welcome to today's webinar. So my name is Stuart Entwistle. I'm training manager for Osmond Ergonomics. And today what we'll do over the next 45-50 minutes is just look at sort of postural awareness, but in vehicles, as we're all sort of getting out and about a bit more nowadays. So I will just sort of point out that this webinar is about how we have our car cockpit set up. It's not about driving techniques or making you a better driver or anything like that. It's just been created based on my 20+ years in ergonomics. Myself as a driver who pre-COVID, I was doing probably just over 30,000 miles a year. And from all my driving training that I've had over the years, most significantly the Institute of Advanced Motorists. So that's where the content of this has come from. So what I'll do is I'll introduce myself and Osmond Ergonomics to those of you who aren't aware of us. We'll look at what the risks are from adopting poor postures, which is pretty much the same whether we're in the car, whether we're in the office, whatever we're doing. The risks from adopting poor postures is pretty much the same. How we should have our car cockpit set up. So I'll go through sort of how we should have the seat set up, steering wheel, the mirrors, etc. And then other considerations that we need to sort of take on board just to sort of keep ourselves happy and relaxed when we're driving. And then right at the end, there's some free resources. And if we have time, I'll go through those. But as I say, the slides will be sent out. So you'll have all the links available after today. So the aims of this webinar or workshop will get you to understand the risks of adopting poor postures, know how to set up your car cockpit correctly, and understand what better habits we can adopt when we're in our vehicles. So quite simple, really. So in terms of myself, for those of you on today's webinar who haven't met or spoken to me in the past, I've been working for Osmond Ergonomics. Well, I'm in my 21st year now. So I started off delivering one-to-one training to users who were receiving the equipment. After doing that for about 3 or 4 years, decided I needed a fresh challenge, so I became an advanced DSC assessor in 2005. And I've carried out many workstation assessments, whether that be display screen equipment assessments, escalated assessments, or the one I enjoy the most is carrying out assessments for students going into university with disabilities. So I think I can speak on behalf of my colleagues that we get a lot more reward from that, trying to improve a student's study area when we're looking at disabilities. So that's where my background is. And then in 2013, took over or started the role of training manager. So mainly delivering external training, one-day DSE assessor courses, webinars, workshops like this. But I also oversee our internal training within Osmond Ergonomics. In terms of us, who we are, so we're based just outside of Wimborne in Dorset or near Bournemouth, but we have a national coverage. We're corporate members of the Chartered Institute of Ergonomics and Human Factors. We have approved training from the International Institute of Risk Safety Management, and then we also have the other accreditations which clients require of us. And in terms of my colleagues, if you ever need to speak to any of my colleagues, and we've all done advanced display screen equipment assessors course. So whether you speak to my colleagues who are on the customer service team, whether you end up seeing one of my installation colleagues, and we've all done advanced DSE assessor courses. So we understand what's going on within the office and the workplace, and sort of how people have got to where they are, so we can answer those questions quite adequately. And then we've all done 3-day ergonomics in practice course, which looks at the wider sort of subject of ergonomics, so not just sort of workplace ergonomics, but manufacturing, how products are created to suit the majority of people. So that was a very interesting course. We do regular internal training days just to keep our knowledge up to date. And it's not just about what the next new shiny product is that's coming to market. We take a sort of more holistic approach to our training. So we've done dyslexia awareness. We've looked at mental health awareness, mindfulness, etc. Myself and colleagues who drive for the company, we've all done advanced driving courses as well. So that was a little bit about Osmond Ergonomics and us. And I should say, actually, the crucial bit that I did miss, in terms of what we do as a business, we just look at improving well-being and productivity within the workplace. So whether that's through products, training, advice, that's what we're all about. Okay, so on to the content for today, or for this webinar. Sorry, postural awareness for vehicles. So I always like to, because I never know who's going to be on these webinars or these workshops, so I always start from the basics. And I expect the sensible place is to start with what is ergonomics. So ergonomics is about fitting the task and the equipment to the user rather than the other way around. So whether it's in the workplace, whether it's in the car, it's about fitting that task and that equipment to you rather than you adopting poor postures to get the job done. So I always use the car as a good example for ergonomics because it's something that we, most of us, I think, drive. If we don't drive, then we've all been in a vehicle and we've sort of seen what the interior of vehicles can do. And in terms of ergonomics, we have adjustable seats, we have adjustable steering wheels, mirrors, and all of this is so that we can set the car cockpit up so it suits our stature, suits us, so that when we set off on our journey going from A to B, then, we can reach the pedals, we can see out the windows. And, that's probably the easiest way of describing sort of what ergonomics is. So what we need to do is before we set off or when we get a new car is to look at sort of the car cockpit and get it set up so it suits us. So why do we need to look after our posture? So this is quite general, whether you're in vehicles, whether you're in the workplace, but essentially we're not designed to maintain static postures for prolonged periods. We're designed to be stood up and moving, or I suppose laying down and sleeping. But the crucial thing is when we're awake, we're designed to be moving regularly. And there's plenty of studies online which will show that we can spend up to sort of 9 to 14 of our 14 hours of our day seated. And you're probably thinking, well, surely it can't be that much. But actually, if you sort of examine your day-to-day sort of lifestyle, then, we get up in the morning, we have breakfast before going to work. Quite often, well, with vehicles, we'll be sat in a vehicle driving to work. We could be on public transport, sat down to go to the office. When we get to the office, then we end up sort of just going straight to our desk and sitting for too long. We don't take lunch away from the desk. And then we repeat that cycle in the afternoon. Then when we come home, we sit down in front for the family meal and sit down for the to unwind in front of the TV probably. So we do spend a lot of our time seated, and for us who are use vehicles as part of our job, then we spend even more time seated. And then I think also with us working from home, which a lot of us are still doing, then there isn't a lot of movement involved in our day unless we try and introduce it, because we end up just going from the bedroom into the spare room or into the lounge, the dining room, just to carry out our work. But when it comes to driving, we can spend a lot of our time in the vehicle. So we need to make sure we look after our health, because these problems sort of build up over time and we're not aware of the problems sort of developing within our body until there is a trigger. So quite often when it's in the workplace, people say to me when I go and do an assessment and I ask why I'm here, they'll say, well, maybe my lower back hurts. And, I put that down to dropping a pen or a bit of paper on the floor. I picked it up and now my back hurts. And they sort of, associate that pain with that that particular issue. But actually, if you study their habits, their lifestyle over months and years, you probably see that actually there were clues as to, that person getting a musculoskeletal disorder developing. And the same is in the vehicles. We spend too much time in the car, we don't have our equipment set up, then through those static postures that we're asking our body to adopt, then these problems will slowly build up over time until there is a trigger. And then that's unfortunately, I tend to find it tends to be a management issue from there on. So we need to try and get into good habits so we don't end up having to sort of manage our health so these problems don't occur. So, but when these problems do build up, it's a cost to us, there's a cost to our employer. We don't leave these problems in the car when we finish at work, or we don't leave them in the pedestal in our drawers, or when we turn the computer off, that pain doesn't go away. So there is a cost to us when we're out of work, and I've spoken to many of people, and I'm sure some of you on today's webinar have spoken to people where it has quite an impact on their personal lives. So, there is a cost to us, and it's not just a workplace sort of cost, but with employers as well, when they want us to be as productive and as healthy and as happy as we can at work. So, we look after our own health and safety, our own well-being, and then if we can't do that, we seek support from others, then that's the best way of doing it. So But on the Health and Safety Executive website, you can see that there are, tens of millions of days lost, working days lost each year through musculoskeletal and mental health issues. And that is a cost of business. And so, if we can look at all of this and sort of take proactive approaches to all of our, daily habits, then that's just going to help our well-being and keep us productive and healthy. So what are the risks? Well, the obvious ones, and I've mentioned it a couple of times in the first 5 minutes, is musculoskeletal disorders. So for those of you who aren't familiar with that term, it refers to a group of conditions characterized by pain and loss of physical function. So that could be just aches and pains in the back, in the neck, in the wrist, anything that sort of has an impact on how you work or how you function within the world. Now, those in terms of the driving, the link there for the RAC, they've got a great article on sort of, ergonomics and driving, but they do say that driving has shown that people who drive for more than 20 hours a week, there is an increased risk factor for back pain. So, sitting in that car all the time, and I think it's not just the sitting, it's what we do when we arrive at our destination as well. So, it's that there's lots of evidence out there in terms of the vehicles and sort of how we sit. So, the other thing, visual fatigue, our environment or what we're looking at can sort of affect our eyes. Now, when I talk about office ergonomics, if we stare at the screen for too long, then we increase that visual fatigue. And the reason for that is from staring at a screen, our blink rate reduces, and we're also staring at a fixed point. So there's 6 muscles in the eyes, and they need to be active just as much as the muscles in the rest of the body. So if we end up staring at a screen, the muscles in the eyes can become tired. When that blink rate reduces, then the eyes can dehydrate. So we want to make sure that we are looking around at different viewing points regularly. Now, when it comes to computer use, opticians often recommend adopting a 20-20-20 rule. So that's once you've been looking at the screen for 20 minutes, look away at something for 20 seconds that's about 20 feet away. But when it comes to the driving, focusing straight ahead at one point, that can cause issues with the eyes. Also, if we've got a sunny day, you're driving into the sun, then the environment, those issues can increase the strain on the eyes. So we want to make sure that, we look after the eyes to stop that visual fatigue, because ultimately whatever we're looking at affects our posture. So we can't see it clearly, then we're going to adopt a poor posture to try and see whatever we're looking at. So we want to make sure that everything is set up so we can see things clearly and that we're not increasing that fatigue. Stress, that's another one that has an impact on our posture, has an impact on our well-being. So there's the physical stress and there's the psychological stress. So we look at the physical stress. People who are stressed, they tend to fidget less, they tense the body. We increase muscle tension within the body, and we want the muscles to be nice and relaxed. We want them to be we want to be comfortable, relaxed. That's how muscles like to be, unless they're actually working or moving, should I say. So we want to make sure that we reduce that physical stress, but then that often comes from the psychological side of things. Now, I experience this when I'm experiencing stressful periods. Then I notice that I carry that stress in my shoulders, in my upper back and neck, and I tense the muscles. So, we want to make sure that we address any psychological issues that are going on. So, but that could be traffic when it comes to driving. It could be delays on our way, whether that's roadworks, whether that's accidents. It could be the technology that's within the vehicle, whether that's working correctly, whether it's intuitive to use, or it could be something like the experience that we have with driving. Some people are more confident at driving than others, whether that's down to how long you've been driving, experience, etc. There's all different reasons for that, but what we want to do is try and look after the stress side of things. And as we go through this webinar, I'll try and give hints and tips on how we can do that. But I did notice doing the research for this, there was I noticed that there was in 2020 this year, there's an ergonomics postgrad student has one of his project was to look at the COVID risk from driving, and what he ascertained was that when we're driving, drivers tend to sort of touch their face or their mouth sort of about 26 times every hour. So if you think about how COVID is transmitted, then, you know, we have through, and I think probably boredom or, you know, the long drives, you know, we end up sort of touching our faces, touching our body. So if we can reduce that, then again, you know, it reduces that transmission risk. But generally, just with germs, I think it's a good idea to try and reduce that contact. So in terms of the body, just to sort of give a little bit of background now, I'm not medically trained in this. As I say, I've just been learning on the job for the last 21 years. But we have ligaments, tendons, nerves, muscles, skeleton within our body. So, and they all have a job to do, and they all get affected by poor postures or the activities we're doing. So we have ligaments, which are the bone-to-bone connective tissue. So what I find is, especially within the workplace and probably more for drivers as well, is if we keep adopting poor postures, then those ligaments can stretch or they can contract. I usually use the upper back, the shoulders, as an example for this, because a lot of people, when they're either driving or they're using a keyboard, they roll their shoulders inwards. So effectively what we do is we lengthen the ligaments on the back of the shoulders, end up stretching, the ligaments in the front of the shoulders end up contracting. So then we end up sort of feeling it feels unusual to adopt a good posture because of that muscle memory, that those ligaments changing. So it may feel a bit strange if you go back to your car after this webinar and try and set things up, or even if you try and set your office chair up and try and adopt better postures. It may feel strange to start with, but that's just the body getting used to being in a good posture. Tendons, I don't think tendons are effective so much when it comes to driving. Normally I refer to mouse usage or using the keyboard. You know, the tendons that run through the forearm, through the wrist, so as you can see on the image, you know, I see them as almost like brake cables. So the more movement we do with the fingers, then the more movement we're having with the tendons. And with the carpal tunnel joint, there isn't a lot of space there. So tendons can rub, and then we get tendinitis, which is inflammation of the tendons. And to try and reduce that inflammation, especially in the wrists and the hands, is very difficult because we use our hands and wrists so much. So we want to try and avoid repetitive actions just to sort of keep those tendons happy. We have the nerves that relay messages to and from the brain. So quite often when it comes to assessing, you know, the body sends out weird signals. So someone may be experiencing pain in one area of the body, but actually, you know, if you look at the body on a whole and the nervous system on a whole, quite often the trigger for that pain is somewhere else in the body. So I've seen it where people have exhibited pain in the arm, the lower arm and the wrist, but actually the problem has stemmed from the neck. You know, so how the nerves relay those messages can be quite unique. And then muscles, which is, I think, the main thing we need to sort of be aware of when we're, you know, doing our activities, whether it's driving or working in the office. Muscles are designed to be relaxed or moving. So the graph that's on the screen now shows 3 different types of activities: resting, dynamic effort and static effort, and then 2 colored columns. So the lighter colored column is the blood flow that is needed to that muscle group in that during that activity, and then the darker colored column is the blood flow is actually provided to that muscle group during that activity. So when we're resting, which is typically laid down sleeping, then the muscles are relaxed. We're not moving, but because the muscles are relaxed, you know, they don't need a lot of fresh blood supply to them. The fidgeting that we do when we're sleeping is enough to sort of refresh the muscles, I suppose, but the muscles essentially are fairly happy. When we're looking at dynamic effort, which is typically walking down the street, climbing a set of stairs, going down the gym, then the muscles need a lot more fresh blood and nutrients provided to them. But because we're moving, then the muscles actually get that fresh blood and nutrients, and they expel the waste products that is created within that muscle group during that activity. So again, the body is relatively happy. Now the disconnect comes is when we're looking at static effort, which is pretty much when we're sat down. So when we sit down, the body is the muscles are working to support ourselves, but we're not moving. So the muscles so when we enter the chair, enter the car, then, you know, the muscles have got fresh blood, nutrients provided to them, but then over a period of time the muscles use that oxygen, those nutrients, create waste products like lactic acid. But because we're not moving too much, then the muscles can't get rid of that, and they can't draw in fresh nutrients. So then that's where that disconnect comes. And for any of you, you know, who have try to sort of hold something for a long period of time without moving, then then you feel those muscles tie, you feel them ache, and that's essentially what's going on with the body when we're sat down. But sometimes we can't feel it as much, but that's why we want to sort of keep regular movement. And then just to quickly touch on the spine and neck, just to sort of complete that picture. We have a picture of the spine on the screen. So this is the rear view. So you can see all the vertebrae, which are the ivory colored bits. So we've got the neck at the top, or the base of the skull at the neck, and the first 7 vertebrae, which are classed as the cervical area. So we have 7 vertebrae in the neck, then we have 12 vertebrae in the thoracic area, which is the area where the rib cage connects to, protects our vital organs, and then we have the lumbar spine, which is consists of 5 vertebrae. So it's normally the lower back or the neck as an assessor that I see problems with. And, part of it is either sitting poorly, or maybe having our equipment set up so we're encouraging our neck to adopt a poor posture, which puts a lot of strain on the muscles, joints, and everything around the neck. And for those of you who aren't aware of how heavy the head is, the head weighs about 5 to 6 kilos. So that's about 5 litres of water, 10-pin bowling ball. I've been told it's the average weight of an adult cat, but I'm not a cat person, so I wouldn't know about that. But it is quite a heavy weight. Now, when we're stood up, as seen on the picture here in the normal posture, then the muscles around the neck and the upper body are relatively happy, and we tend to be looking around, so it's not too bad. But when we start to lean our head forwards and change the posture of the neck, then we increase the effective weight of the head. So for 3 or 4 inches of forward movement, then we've effectively increased the weight of the head to about 20-25 kilos, and that is quite a weight to ask the muscles and the joints and everything, ligaments in your neck and the sort of the upper back to support, especially if we go back to that static muscle load where we can't hold something in one position for a long period of time. That's what we're asking the neck to do. So this relates to seating posture when it comes to the drive and having your car seat set up, because if we have the backrest position incorrectly, we're reclined too much, then we end up affecting the posture of the neck and sort of where our head is because of where we have to look. So it's important that we sort of are aware of what the body's doing and how we can sort of accommodate our setup to make ourselves as relaxed and as comfortable as possible. So on to the actual the driving side of things and the car cockpit. So the effects of driving on the body, well, the main thing is the static postures and the long periods. I know when I was younger, I wasn't aware so much of taking regular breaks apart from sort of to eat or drink, or maybe a comfort break. But there are times when, looking back, I have driven for too long. And it's those long periods of sort of just sitting in the driving seat in static postures will have an impact on the lower back, have an impact on sort of, well, probably all of the muscles in our body. So we want to sort of make sure that, we take regular breaks during our drives. We may have flex postures. So, over my many years of driving, I've seen some awful postures of people driving. And I do wonder sort of how they can sort of be comfortable and how they can be confident in their driving and how they can see everything when they're in these poor postures. So So getting everything set up so we can be relaxed. Something that I took on board very early in my role here was lifting activities. So for me, pre-COVID, then I would have a boot full of equipment with me. So that comprises of chairs, keyboards, mice, all of these different things that I would require when going out to do an assessment. And something I learned early on is, well, after I've done a drive and I've arrived at the destination, is not to go straight to the boot and start lifting things, because we've been static first for a long period of time. So we want to make sure we get the body warmed up first. There could be, when we arrive at the destination, it could be twisting to reach objects of the back seat. So again, if the body's stiff, we haven't moved for a while, as soon as you twist round to then grab something off the back seat, then we're putting strain and putting our lower back at risk of injury, or just causing a problem there. So yeah, twisting straight away is something that we don't advise. And then also, it could be that we're not used to driving on long journeys, and I've certainly seen that since COVID arrived. I've spent pretty much the last 18 months working at home in front of a computer, whereas, you know, I was doing 30,000 miles a year. So now I'm getting back into the car, going to visit people. You know, it does feel strange. You know, I'm feeling aches and pains in the body where, you know, where the body hasn't, you know, it's got used to not driving. So now trying to get it back into the habit of driving. So feet, ankles, knees, all those sort of joints, you know, they are stuck, you know, I'm having to sort of, I suppose, build those joints and muscles back up again. So, but someone who doesn't drive for a living, maybe they're going on a holiday, a staycation, putting a tent in the back of the car, maybe turn a caravan, you know, or go into a hotel. You know, you're not, if you're only used to driving to the supermarket or to your place of work, then going on a holiday, driving to the other side of the country, the other end of the country, you know, may not be used to that. And then we've got the stress, which is related to traffic. And, you know, that was something that I'd forgotten how stressful it was when you're out on the road, especially during certain times of the day. So rush hours in the morning or afternoon. So it's something that I sort of certainly kind of gladly forgot about, was the stress, but it is there. So we need to sort of be aware of that. So how are we going to look at sort of doing all of that? So first of all, you know, preparing for the drive, preparing for a setup. So when we do vehicle assessments, the first thing I would do with an individual is get them to move their steering wheel up and away from them. And I'm aware that different makes of cars, different years of cars have different amounts of, you know, adjustability features. So not all of this will be available within the vehicle that you're driving. But where possible, if you do have these options, then this is the way we would sort of advise looking at setting your car up, so, or your vehicle. So move the steering wheel up and away, move the seat backwards away from the dashboard, and then adjust the seat so it's on its lowest position. So we want to drop the seat down and then tilt this, if you've got a tilt option on your chair, and quite often that is sort of fitted in with the height adjustment of the chair, but tilt the seat so the front edge of the cushion is sat at its lowest position. So we've dropped it away from underneath the thighs. We want to recline the backrest slightly, so probably only to about 30 degrees from horizontal. Or vertical, sorry. And then if your backrest has any if you have any lumbar support built in with the chair, then wind that off so that you can't feel it. So once we've done that, then we can start setting the seat up. So we want to move the seat forward so that you can easily depress the clutch and the brake pedal without overstretching the legs. So we want to just be able to gently push down on those pedals without overstretching, because quite often I find that if we do have to overstretch, then what we're doing is we're pulling on the hips and the lower back ever so slightly. The body will be twisting. So we don't want to, you know, if you think about how many times that we use these pedals, if there's a little sort of twist involved in sort of using that pedal within the upper body, then over time that could cause a problem. We want to raise the height of the seat so that then you can see the road clearly. You want to check that you can still press those pedals easily and have good control of them. But when we raise the chair, we want to make sure that you have enough head clearance between the top of your head and the headlining of the car. Now the guidance is about 10 centimeters, or if you can put a closed fist between your head and the headlining, then that's enough. And the reason why we want to make sure that we have enough head clearance is so that in the event of an accident and the car rolls, then we want to make sure that there is enough space so then we don't end up hitting our head on the headlining of the car. So when we've adjusted those, then we need to look at the angle of the seat base. So we want to try and adjust the angle of the seat base so that the thighs are supported all the way along the length. Some vehicle assessments I've done, users will have the seat dropped tilted forward, so there is no support underneath the whole length of the thighs. So that ends up sort of, you know, having that lack of support can affect the comfort on the legs. We want to also avoid pressure behind the back of the knee. Now, in terms of my stature, I'm, I suppose, just slightly below average, but I have had in the past where vehicles that I've driven where that seat base actually touches the back of my knee. So very similar to office chair setups, we want to make sure we have a little gap between the back of the knee and the front of that seat base. And from my experience, all those years of, well, I think I had a particular car which I drove for about 3 years. About 2.5 years in, I started getting a severe cramp in my right calf muscle. So I tried to use my knowledge to work out what was going on. The only thing I could sort of ascertain was that I did have pressure on the back of the knee, back of the calf. So I put in a back cushion, back support, just to sort of push me forward on the seat to give me that gap between the back of the knee and the front of the seat base. And within about a week, couple of weeks, that cramping sensation died down and has now disappeared. So for me, I put that down to that seat base being too long for my leg lengths. So we want to make sure that we do have that suitable gap, and then also try and avoid positioning the hips lower than the knees. I know car seats are set up so that we end up having our hips lower, and to avoid submarining under the seatbelt in terms of in the event of an accident. But when we start bringing our hips lower than our knees, then we actually put extra pressure on our lower back. So it's a case of just trying to find that happy balance of trying to get your hips level with your knees so that we can sort of at least help the lower back to adopt a better posture. So adjusting the backrest. So we've got the seat base set up. We can see out the window. We can reach those pedals. So now we need to make sure our back is supported correctly. So you want to bring the backrest forward so it provides continuous support along the length of your back up to the shoulders. Now, depending on the car seat, this may not be entirely possible, but that's what we're trying to achieve. Don't recline the backrest too much because this will cause tension in the upper back and shoulders, and that comes from just having not being able, or having your arms out too far to reach the steering wheel. So we want to just try and keep our back supported and relaxed and keep those shoulders nice and relaxed. If you do have lumbar support within the backrest of your chair, then we look at adjusting the depth and the height so that we can give that support into the lower part of the back, our lumbar region. And if you're unsure where your lumbar curve is, then what you can do as an easy way to sort of ascertain where it is if you just hold your hands out in front of you so that you're, fingers are forward, thumbs pointing back, and if you put your hands on your hips so your thumbs are pointing towards your spine, bring your hands round so that your thumbs touch, then that's where the lumbar curve is. So that's where we want to try and get the lumbar support positioned, and we just want gentle support into the lumbar spine so that we are trying to reintroduce that gentle lumbar curve. Now, if you're unable to do that and you are experiencing backrest, and there are cushions available, we are just exploring a new range of cushions. So in due course, hopefully we'll have something to add on to the website. And if you already subscribe to our product radar, it will appear in that. So you'll get notified when they're on our website. But we are looking at sort of new cushions that are coming out to provide better back support. But whether it's maybe as an interim, inflatable lumbar support, like similar to you get on an office chair, maybe a rolled up towel for the lower back. You can also get seat cushions that you can put onto the seat base to try and level it up a bit as well. So there are cushions around if you need to sort of make adaptations to your car seat. So once we've got that, hopefully we're sort of getting to a point where you're feeling relatively comfortable. You can see out the window and you can reach the pedals nice and easily. So the next things we need to set up would be the steering wheel. So we want to bring that towards us and we want to bring it downwards slightly. So what we're looking to do is we're aiming to sort of be able to have your arms outstretched and just be able to rest your wrists on top of the steering wheel with a slight bend in the arm. So that's the optimum position for your steering wheel. If it is too far up and too far away, then tension will, you will build up tension in the upper back and shoulders. And if you're driving for long periods, that will build up to a possible problem. We want to make sure that once we've adjusted the steering wheel, that you do have clearance underneath the steering wheel, between the steering wheel and your thighs, so that you can use all the pedals effectively and you're not going to get your legs trapped or the steering wheel trapped, especially if you have now my car's got a steering wheel which has a flat edge to it, so when I'm driving in a straight line going forward, then that flat bit of the steering wheel is just above my thighs. But I also need to make sure that if I'm turning around a corner that I can still use the pedals effectively. So just make sure that you've got full clearance there. And then also importantly, make sure that once you've got your steering wheel set up, then you can see the display panel in front of you, and it's not obstructed by any part of the steering wheel. Just one thing to point out, and this is in terms of the airbag safety, the advice for airbags is to make sure that you've got about a 25 centimeter gap between yourself and the airbag cover. The reasons for that is so that in the event of an accident, if the airbag does go off, then if you're too close to it, then there's a risk of getting burns from the explosives within the detonator within the airbag that enables it to inflate. And if you're too far away, then there won't be enough space, or the bag won't be big enough to absorb that movement done by the body in the event of an accident. So 25 centimeters is the recommended gap between yourself and the airbag cover or the center of the steering wheel. Okay, so then we've got all that set up, so we need to look at the headrest. So I've seen many people driving with headrests sort of not positioned correctly. Maybe they haven't even, it's a shared car and they haven't even thought about the neck rest or the headrest. But we want to get that supported correctly, because that plays a crucial role in the event of a rear end accident. So we want to make sure that we have that headrest so that it is positioned just behind the back of the skull. We don't want permanent contact there, otherwise we'll end up sort of pushing our head forward, which will sort of put the neck into an unusual posture. We want it just slightly back so that when we sort of lean our head back, then we can just make contact with it. And what the aim of the headrest is to just stop that whiplash, to stop that head from going back and then causing whiplash injuries to the spine, the vertebrae, and the discs in the neck. So we want to make sure that we have that head support position correctly. And then the other bits would be the rear view mirrors, side mirrors. We want to make sure that they're positioned correctly, obviously, so we can see objects behind us and vehicles that are passing us if we're on dual carriageways, motorways, etc. We want to be able to see all of that going on around us. We want to make sure that we can try and position the mirrors so they can be used without introducing too much neck rotation or twisting of the body to actually view those mirrors. Now, side mirrors are a little bit more difficult depending on where they're positioned in the car and how the interior is set up or is designed, sorry. So, I find myself with my vehicle, I do have to sort of do some neck rotation to look at the especially the passenger side mirror, the near side mirror, because of just where they're positioned and where I'm positioned in the car to reach the pedals and the mirrors, the pedals and the steering wheel. But we just want to try and get the best position we can so that we're not doing those repetitive movements in the neck. Make sure the seatbelt rests comfortably across the shoulder. Now, I think a lot of cars now do have height adjustable seatbelts so that we can move them up and down depending on our stature. But we want the seatbelt just to rest nice and comfortably across the shoulder, because if we have it resting anywhere else on the body, I've seen them where they're across the stomach or they're across the neck. But if you think in the event of an accident, it could cause other injuries if the seatbelt isn't positioned correctly. So we need to make sure that that's in the right place. Footwear, we want to make sure that, for female drivers, avoid wearing high heels. And then for anyone else, thick-soled shoes, because that sort of wearing high heels affects the position of our feet and how the ankles and the knees work and everything like that. It also has an effect on sort of how we use the pedals and the feedback we're getting from the pedals, as with the thick-soled shoes. And also, I've noticed many years ago when I was wearing safety boots, then they tend to be quite wide as well compared to your normal footwear. So there is a risk of getting your pressing two pedals at the same time if your shoes are too wide or thick soled, so you don't get that feedback either. So avoid, have sensible footwear for driving. Now, I have a pair of driving shoes. They're nice, effectively trainers. They're lightweight, they're easy, they're nice and comfortable to wear when I'm driving. So I do tend to have a pair of driving shoes, should I say. So potentially, so we've got the car set up now, and we're all ready to go. So the next thing we need to sort of be aware of is sort of our journey and the planning of the journey, and what we do during that journey and what we do after that journey to sort of keep ourselves healthy. And I suppose sort of have this has a direct effect on our mental health if we're our well-being generally, if we're not sort of planning our journey. So we want to make sure that you know, we make sure the vehicle is safe to drive, that we prepare the vehicle. So that would be checking tires, fuel, washer fluid, our lights, making sure the vehicle is fit for that drive to where we're going. As we've just gone through, you want to make sure that the cockpit is set up. Maybe you're renting a vehicle to go on a holiday, or you're using a pool car, you're using a partner's vehicle. So we want to make sure that, you know, we do set that cockpit up. As we've just gone through, make sure that you're familiar with the controls and the technology within the vehicle. Make sure you know how the indicators work, how the lights work, and sort of, I suppose nowadays, how the GPS works, if that's built in, because the last thing you want to be doing is trying to sort of work those things out whilst you're driving. So make sure that you're familiar with the controls and the technology within the vehicle. We want to make sure that we plan our routes. And, you know, that may be sort of planning the time that we're leaving. It could be the type of roads that we're driving on. A lot of people, you know, I think will avoid motorways if they haven't got that confidence. They don't drive a lot, so they'll use the A roads. But there's a lot of sort of statistics out there to say that motorways are statistically safer during certain times of the day for driving. So as well as getting you there probably quicker, they are safer to drive on. And then we don't want to rush, otherwise we increase the stress. We want to allow ourselves plenty of time to sort of get to our destination. There's nothing worse than sort of clock watching and thinking, I'm going to be late for this meeting because I haven't left myself enough time, or maybe there's been you know, delays sort of on your route. So we want to make sure that we do all of this pre-journey so that we can make our drive as enjoyable as possible. So when we're on the journey, we want to make sure that we stay relaxed, we stay nice and comfortable when we're driving, try not to get too tensed during our drive, but taking breaks regularly is the crucial thing. So we want to take breaks from driving at least every 2 hours. And when we take a break, we want it to last for about 15 to 20 minutes. And it means getting out of the car and going for a walk or a stretch. So it's not sort of taking a break and then staying in the car and checking emails or making phone calls. It's about getting out, standing up, walking around for about 15 to 20 minutes, just so that we can get everything in the body moving, refresh the muscles, refresh the joints and everything, and also refresh our mind, get some fresh air, and keep ourselves alert. And then when we get to the journey, or get to our destination, I found that we want to avoid twisting, we want to avoid overstretching, lifting heavy items, because the body, as you know, we've been on a journey, say we've been in the car for 2 hours, the last thing we want to do is to stretch around to the back seat, or go into the boot and lift something fairly heavy, because otherwise we are at risk of injuring ourselves. So we want to make sure that when we arrive, that we get some movement first. So as an example, what I used to do when I was taking equipment to client sites, I would go in, I would introduce myself, I would have that introductory sort of chat for 10-15 minutes, and then I would go out to the car and get whatever I needed, because it's given my body a chance to sort of get some movement and get the muscles warmed up again. So when it comes to just general advice for driving, you know, I find it a lot better if we can avoid periods of peak traffic flow. So those rush hours in the morning and the afternoon. Quite often I will set off a little bit earlier if I'm in the morning, if I'm going somewhere, just to try and avoid some of that rush hour traffic, or I may end up sort of you know, trying to set an appointment so I can go either after or before, as I said. We want to avoid twisting on the seat or leaning to one side. Now, there are some vehicles that I've come across in my sort of travels which don't accommodate, or, you know, they encourage twisting of the body. And what I mean by that is, if when you're sat in your car, if you look at where your pedals are and then where your steering wheel is, effectively that should be a straight line through you. So but quite often steering wheels and pedals aren't quite aligned. So I did a series of assessments for an organization where everyone was you know, complaining of back problems, and the make of vehicle that they used for their company vehicles, the pedals were slightly offset to the right side. So when they were driving, the hips and the lower back were twisted. So we want to make sure that we try and avoid that twisting, or lean into one side. I know, you know, I've seen I suppose the younger drivers when they're in their cars, lean into one side, you know, resting their arm on the center armrest, one arm up on the top of the steering wheel, and they're just leaning to one side. But that's going to put a lot of strain on the lower back, and could end up causing problems. Refrain from using a laptop in the car. I know it's tempting to get the laptop out quickly to do 10-15 minutes worth of work if you're arrive early for somewhere, but refrain from doing that. If you do have to use a laptop in the car, then what I would suggest is, and this is only if you have to do it, is to move over to the passenger seat, so you haven't got the steering wheel and the pedals all in the way. It gives you a little bit more space, but essentially what I would suggest is getting out of the car, finding somewhere to use your laptop if you do need to access it during your journey. Try and park away, far away from the building as possible. You know, even if it's personal, you know, if you go shopping, try and park a little bit away, because then that will encourage movement. It increases the amount of steps we do during the day. So it's just a little technique that we can put into our day just to increase our movement as we go through. And then important to make sure that you've got proper arrangements sorted out for carrying and properly securing any equipment or materials that you're carrying in your vehicle, because in the event of an accident, then you know, they do become sort of missiles, really. And I have seen videos over my years where, you know, someone ends up going into the back of someone, whatever's in the boot, if it's not secured properly, especially in an estate vehicle, then it can make its way to the front of the car very quickly. So we want to make sure that everything is secured properly. When you know, if you're loading your boot to do several appointments and you've got to unload that boot when you get to the appointment, think about sort of where that equipment is going to go in your boot and how heavy it is. I would tend to put the heaviest items near the front, near the opening, because then it's easier to get hold of once you get to your destination. If you put the heavy items towards the back, then you will end up leaning into the boot and you're increasing the effective weight of whatever it is you're trying to get out. So we want to try and keep it to the front edge. But if you do have to put heavy items towards the back of the boot, then maybe a slide mat could be something that could be useful. So just a nylon sheet that goes underneath on the boot floor, and then you can just pull that that slide mat to enable you to pull the whatever you're having to get out of the boot closer to the the boot aperture. And then final further driving training. You know, if you're managing a team of staff who are on the road, you know, would further training be advisable? There is lots of training providers out there for driving. So the most popular ones, I think, that are well known would be the Institute of Advanced Motorists, or maybe ROSPA. So they do very good courses to that go beyond what you would normally do in a basic driving lesson and driving test. So I certainly sort of got a lot from it when I did mine. Now, when we are driving, it's essential to have emergency items available. Be prepared. So I think a lot of cars come with safety kits now. So your warning triangles, high-vis vests. So we want to make sure that we have those available. So if we get a puncture, if we break down, then we can alert other road users that we have broken down, and that protects ourselves. Having some water, a bottle of water in the car, and this isn't your usual sort of you know, daily drink. It's just making sure that you've got a spare bottle of water in the car that you can consume, and non-perishable foods, possibly a blanket. And those three is something that you know, I've benefited from in the past. I think there's been 3 occasions where I've ended up being stuck in traffic for 11 hours, and that was down to snow related or winter related issues. So there was one journey I was doing, I was about 45 minutes away from home. The snow came down, it was about 3 o'clock, and I don't think I got home till about 3 in the morning, just because the whole road system ground to a halt. So I was quite thankful that I had my extra lunch, my you know, snacks in the car, which I just keep there, and the extra water. I didn't have a blanket, but I had a coat with me and stuff like that. So I was quite thankful that I had those items with me. First aid kit is essential within a car, not only for us, but if we come across someone who's in need of help on our journey, then we've got something that possibly may be able to help. And then a phone charger as well. There's nothing worse than, you know, if you do get delayed, then you know, not being able to charge the phone. A lot of cars now seem to be coming through with charging points built in, but I think most of us now will have a cable within the car, because we use our phone so much for GPS, etc., and during the breaks of our driving. So I think a lot of us have those, but you know, those are just a suggestion of some of the emergency items that are a good idea to sort of have in our car no matter what. Okay, so we've come to the 50 minutes mark, and that's pretty much sort of the webinar I've gone through. So and now's the time, if you